All right, Senator, we're live. Feel free to start.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Senator Anthony Bucco, and I'll be chairing today's panel. I want to thank you for joining us for this independent hearing to examine the surge of whale and dolphin deaths that has occurred along the Jersey Shore in recent months. We're also going to discuss general concerns related to the development of offshore wind farms just miles off our beaches. Some people have questioned whether the surge of whale and dolphin deaths is linked to survey work that's underway for the wind farms. Those are legitimate concerns that deserve to be heard and thoughtfully considered. Unfortunately, neither Governor Murphy nor the majority party in the legislature has shown any interest in listening. That's why we're here today. We're here to listen and to learn and to better understand a point of view that some people in Trenton would rather ignore. I want to thank all of our witnesses who will appear before this panel. We appreciate your insight and your courage for asking important questions that deserve honest answers. I know we all look forward to a thoughtful discussion today. I am joined by Senator Vince Palestina, who represents Atlantic County, Senator Mike Testa, who represents Cape May, Atlantic, and Cumberland counties, and Senator Declan O'Scanlan, who represents Monmouth County. Before I hand it off to my colleagues for some brief introductory remarks, I want to say one last thing. I'm from Morris County, northern New Jersey. I don't represent a coastal community, but I have heard on more than one occasion from my constituents about these issues. Everyone is talking about it and everyone is concerned. I know that's the case for legislators in every corner of the state. New Jerseyans clearly care about this issue, so all of us in the legislature should care too. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Senator Palestina for some brief introductory remarks. Senator?
Thank you, Senator Bucco, and thanks to everyone who is attending this and participating in what is an important discussion. Obviously, as the senator from Atlantic County, as we have seen, since basically December 1st, something that has been completely unprecedented in the 51 years I have been in Atlantic County, and is extremely frightening with the number of marine mammals that have perished along our shore. Obviously, as we go into our tourist economy, Memorial Day to Labor Day down here, we remain concerned about the situation that is ongoing. We have tried to get as educated as possible about the topic. Obviously, participating in some of the environmental groups, press conferences, participating in some of the federal regulatory updates that have been given, try to get as much information as we possibly can. And I think we see at this point, the main thing is that nobody can point to with certainty what has caused this and what what is behind all of this at our Jersey Shore. And so we are here to get even more educated, to hear from our panelists, to get information from them, try to work with our partners on this topic. And as we move forward with some of the offshore wind activities that we have seen, I do think it is important. When I first called for the moratorium in January, there were two distinct work efforts going on off our coast. One was sonar in the Atlantic Shores lease area. The other was, they call cone penetrometer tests, which many people don't know what that is, but it's essentially drilling in the Orsted location. Nobody can say with certainty, because there's been no studies, that the combination of sonar in one area and drilling in another area has not created a situation where these animals are disoriented or frightened to the point where they're leading to their own demise. And so that's what we remain concerned about. That's why we continue to call for a 30-day moratorium on this so we can see if the impacts continue. I will say, to your point, Senator Bucco, I communicated with the governor directly. He has indicated they're taking it seriously. I know that there has been an allocation of, I think, $2 million now to continue the studies for this. And we have seen a little different tone in some of our federal regulators. So I think these efforts are very important. I think that we need to continue these discussions so that we can try to get to the bottom of what is going on. And again, appreciate everybody's time and knowledge that they bring to this topic so we can try to work together on finding solutions to what we're seeing. So thanks again and looking forward to it.
Senator, I agree wholeheartedly. Senator Testa.
Thank you, Senator Bucco, and thank you for your comments, Senator Palestina. I don't want to repeat any of the information that you've already given to the folks who are listening today. I want to thank everyone for being here. Obviously, my name is Senator Michael Testa. I represent the 1st Legislative District, which comprises all of Cape May County, most of Cumberland County, and a sliver of Atlantic County. First and foremost, I want to make sure that everybody is aware that Cape May County has been fully engaged on this issue from the very beginning. Myself, Assemblyman Simonson, and Assemblyman McClellan have been calling for a moratorium since very early on when the whales and dolphins started to wash up. What we are not happy about is that we've been hearing that this has been a problem since 2016, yet there has been an unprecedented number of beached whales and beached dolphins in my legislative district, as well as other legislative districts throughout the state of New Jersey. Obviously, our shores are extremely important to us. It's important to our tourism industry. It's also extremely important to our commercial and recreational fishing industry. And I've said this multiple times, we only have one chance to get this right or get this catastrophically wrong. And we want to make sure that we're following the science. One thing that our side of the aisle consistently gets accused of is not following the science. So where is the harm if we pause for either 30 days or 60 days in this project to see if we are going to see a continuation of the unprecedented number of whale deaths and dolphin deaths that we have seen? I don't see where the extreme hardship or harm is in taking a serious pause and actually doing what we are doing here today, and that is getting a true objective narrative of what is happening and actually following the science. I also have been a pretty harsh critic of the hypocrisy from the left, and I have said consistently from the very beginning that when I was growing up, there was a bumper sticker that was on a number of cars, "Save the whales." I haven't seen any of the environmental groups, such as Greenpeace or the Sierra Club, coming out against what is happening here. We're calling for a further investigation. All we continue to hear is the same narrative that this is climate change and this is the effect of climate change. And that is why we have to, excuse me, essentially rush to judgment and make sure we go full steam ahead with these wind farms. That is a narrative that I know my constituents, the fishing industries, Cape May County, nor I am willing to buy. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I wholeheartedly agree. We have to follow the science, but there needs to be a balance between where we're headed, but also protecting our marine life. Senator O'Scanlan.
Thanks, Senator. I appreciate it. Senators Palestina, you, Chairman, and Testa have kind of covered everything. Bottom line here is that we're here today to seek information, not to perpetuate previously held beliefs, not to confirm anything. We don't know that offshore wind activities are causing these deaths. We don't definitively know they're not. We're getting and collecting very actively right now information. I'm getting more on my phone as we sit here. And during our hearing yesterday, the discussion with the DEP commissioner was very informative. I'm not ready to be convinced yet, though. There's conflicting information here from both sides. So very much looking forward to today's discussion and moving forward this debate. Thanks for hosting, Senator Bucco. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you to all the senators who are participating today. I also would like to note that Senators Jim Holsapple and Senator Chris Connors, both from Ocean County, are extremely concerned about this issue as well. Unfortunately, they had conflicts and couldn't be here today. I know how involved they've been in Ocean County and in the State House in trying to address the concerns that we're about to discuss, and they have submitted position papers, which will be made part of the record. With that being said, I'd like to call the first panel of witnesses.
So All right, so our first panel is Cindy Zip from Clean Ocean Action, Carrie Martin from Clean Ocean Action, Trisha DeVoe, who's a marine biologist, and Mike Dean, who's a community activist. So maybe Cindy Zip can start.
Hi, great. Good morning, senators. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for hosting this opportunity to discuss the issues. My name is Cindy Ziff, and I represent Clean Ocean Action, which is a organization that was founded in 1984. And I just want to give a little bit of a perspective here, because back then, you know, the ocean was literally a dumping zone. We had 8 ocean dump sites. The water quality was terrible. We had fish kills, dead and dying dolphins washing up on the beach, raw sewage, medical waste. And, you know, these were dire times, and we worked together in a nonpartisan way with science, education, and citizen action, together with our elected officials, to really address all those issues. And we ended ocean dumping, and we cut back a lot on the sewage. It's not 100% yet. We still have some problems, but you know, it just shows when we put the science, the public awareness and education together with citizen action and work with our elected officials, you know, we can come up with solutions. And, you know, I just want to emphasize that, because we were our ocean was on the brink of, you know, of literally destruction. And today it's a thriving ecosystem. We have so many species of whales, 33 species of whales and dolphins enjoy the waters off our coast. 5 species of sea turtles. There's only 7 on the planet, and 5 of them spend some, you know, glorious time off the Jersey Shore. And, you know, it's come a long way. And so when we are thinking about industrializing the ocean, we have to be very careful. The ocean, a clean ocean, depends on all of us, and we all depend on a clean ocean. So working together is so important. For the last 15 or more years, Clean Ocean Action has been actively involved in looking at the possibilities of offshore wind power plants. We've been raising questions and wanting to be sure that we have the science. But you know, very, very quickly, we've gone too far, too fast. There's over 2.2 million acres of ocean that is being dedicated to offshore wind, with 3,500 turbines, as you know, that as tall as the Chrysler Building, and 10,000 miles of cables, all that will be emitting electromagnetic pulses. And finally, there's also these substations that will be potentially emitting hot water into the ocean, which is also of concern. So all of these things need to be factored in. They need to be looked at. And we're only beginning with the pre-construction now. And already, you know, we started seeing whales dying and washing up on our beach. And we became very concerned at whale number 5, and began writing a letter to the president to address these concerns. Because with whale number 5, I asked Carrie Martin, our advocacy campaign manager, to look into this, to investigate this, because again, we always want to look at the science. And she looked into the number of companies that had been applying to get permits for different activities off our coast related to the offshore wind pre-construction activities. And when she put them all together, it was 11 companies, unprecedented, 11 companies that had been given authorization to harass marine life, which I see Teresa DeVoe is on your panel. She's going to provide more clarity to that. But the total number of animals that could be harassed was over 63,000 animals. And the National Marine Fisheries Service itself describes the kinds of harm that can happen to marine life through offshore wind as noise impacts or ship strikes impacts. So when we started seeing this, and we became alarmed that it was plausible that the activity occurring off the shore had to do with the whale die-offs. And so we did have a press conference and asked for the president to investigate the whale deaths. We just felt it was plausible. We felt there was, you know, reason for investigation. We have to be sure that we protect marine life as we move forward with, renewable energy options. And what we faced was a sort of a lot of denial, immediate denial, and and suggestions that the increased shipping had perhaps been the cause of the death. But when we looked into the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, we found that yes, there was a tremendous amount of increase of shipping in the summer. But by December through March, when the whales were washing up, shipping had been declining by 20 to 24%. So if shipping is declining, but the whale deaths were increasing, and at that point, we were getting up to whales number 10, 11, and 12, we became very concerned that there seems to be there's a disconnect between that suggestion of a cause and what was happening with the whales. So again, we feel, as all of you have said, that it's reasonable to take a pause and to do an investigation to make sure that this pre-construction activity, which is nothing like even the major construction, which may happen as early as this year, with the pile driving of the turbines into the seafloor, that will be tremendous amount of noise. We have to get this right. We cannot cause the harm to marine animals and marine life and actually the ecosystem. And you've put together a great panel of people that will be speaking to all of these issues, which I'm very interested in hearing what they have to say as well. And I would just close by saying, once again, that, we all depend on a clean ocean, and a clean ocean depends on all of us. So it's very important that we work, as you all have said, in a nonpartisan, united way to move forward and protect marine life as we evaluate the potential of offshore wind. And that is why Clean Ocean Action is calling for a pilot study, which we can talk about another time, but we just have to get this right. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. I know you have Kerry with you today. Perhaps if Kerry wants to say a few words, that'd be great.
Thank you, Senators, for hosting this important forum to gather the information and share the information available. As Cindy mentioned, Clean Ocean Action has been looking into the information and evidence that is available or that is not available to be able to have an informed opinion and thoughts and have the facts there ready to share with all of you as elected officials, as well as with the public. So Cindy did mention some of the research that we have done. And as she said, there's others on this panel that have additional information. So I'll yield the time to them. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Tricia?
Senator, are you want to have questions to them? Can I ask one thing real quick?
We can either take questions now or we can do it at the end. It's up to you of the entire panel.
Do you mind if I just ask now? Because I'm just curious because,
No.
Cindy, if you don't mind, we've heard about the unexplained mortality event, obviously from BOEM and from NOAA. I guess it started in 2016, which obviously you being Clean Ocean Action have monitored since that time. But it didn't reach the level where you were at a level of concern where you would call for a stoppage or a pause until now in 2022, 2023. So I'm just curious, you have obviously followed the history. You've seen, what they have published, but why at this point did it rise a level of having you come to the point where you called for a pause?
That's a great question, Senator. And I think it certainly was the fact that there were so many animals that died in such a short period of time, which was unique in the UME. It's been since 2016. There have been, and I think perhaps Tricia may be able to speak to this as well. But there has been this increase, and I think it's for ship strikes with humpback whales. So, it has been occurring. There have been some that have suggested that it started in New England area when the survey work started up there for offshore wind. It may be something for there to broaden the investigation to see if there was any evaluation there. And I think perhaps Mike Dean may be able to speak to some of this. But there was this concern, but then, to have a spike of so many whales in such a short period of time. We're talking 13 whales in just basically 3 months. And the answer that we were given that it was due to the increased shipping really doesn't, you know, we've had shipping for years off the Jersey Shore, decades. And we haven't had that kind of a spike. So that to us didn't seem reasonable. So when we had Kari do the investigation and look into the number of, you know, IHAs, the incidental harassment authorizations, and there were 11 companies, that's unprecedented. And then we looked also at the number of ships that were offshore. You know, you can monitor the survey ships, and there were as many as 7 or 8 in the same area at the same time, doing different kinds of survey work. So it just seems extremely plausible. You know, you have to, when you have a mystery, you have to look at all possible options. And this seemed to be one that is deserving of consideration, especially because it's just the pregame for what will be an enormous amount of activity off our coast with the hundreds of turbines that are planned.
Thanks.
Cindy, I'm curious. I thought you said that you sent correspondence to the Biden administration regarding your concerns. Did you send similar correspondence to the Murphy administration? And did you get any response from either administrations?
Yes, no, as the activities that were permitted are under federal jurisdiction, our letter and our effort was focused on the Biden administration.
Get any
Because
response?
the IHAs, all the activity. Although I will point out that we recently learned that the IHAs that are required are really the only tool that we have that is available under the federal government for evaluating the survey work. There's no permitting requirement for offshore wind activity by the Bureau of Ocean and Energy Management, for example. There's no oversight of this activity. There's no regulations for how many ships can be out there at one time, what kinds of activity they can be conducting. That's kind of a big gap that we just recently became aware of. So the only tool, the only way we know that there were 11 companies is because they had to apply for incidental harassment authorizations, which seems to me to be a big gap.
Senator Bucco, if I could make one comment, you know, Cindy, you used a few acronyms, and for those who are listening, if you could please, you know, identify what those acronyms are. And, you know, you talked about the incidentals. To me, they should call it what those incidentals actually are, and that's collateral damage, and it's acceptable collateral damage that's acceptable to them. But I can tell you that my constituents, and I know the constituents of Senator Palestina and the other, you know, coastal senators, there's no amount of collateral damage to these wonderful mammals that is acceptable. And, you know, for some reason, you know, it seems to me to be arbitrary and capricious as to how many or how much collateral damage is in fact acceptable.
Well, that's a very good point, and thank you for calling me out on the acronyms. Yeah, they do sound, they are wonky terms, and I know Tricia DeVoe is here, and she can provide clarity on what those harassments really mean to marine life.
Thank you. Anybody, any of the other senators have anything else? Okay, Tricia?
Hello. I'd like to thank the Senate committee for this opportunity to speak at this hearing. It's an honor to be here, and I'm going to be speaking about the recent humpback whale stranding specifically. So in the 4-month period from December 2022 to March of 2023, we had 12 dead whales wash up on the New Jersey beaches. Now, to put this in perspective, from the years 2002 to 2022, the average number of humpback whale strandings per year in New Jersey was less than 2. So now we have 12 dead whales in New Jersey in just 4 months' time. Now that's a 600% increase over the previous 20-year average. So this is a huge problem and is cause for great concern. These deaths are detrimental not only to the North Atlantic humpback whale populations, but they're harmful to us as well. Anyone that's concerned about climate change should be very concerned about this unusually high number of whales dying. Now, this is because whales are our greatest weapon in the fight against climate change. Whales are known as carbon sinks. So what this means is whales accumulate carbon in their massive bodies over their long lifespan. When they die, they sink to the bottom of the ocean and they take that carbon with them. Each great whale takes on average 33 tons of CO2 out of the atmosphere and keeps it out for centuries. But when whales are alive, they actually play an even greater role in helping our atmosphere, basically by eating and pooping in the ocean. So I know it sounds gross, but whale feces is actually very important because it fertilizes the ocean and produces phytoplankton blooms. Phytoplankton is crucial to life on Earth because it produces 50% of all the oxygen we breathe and captures approximately 40% of all the CO2 produced in the world. So this is the equivalent of 1.7 trillion trees or 4 Amazon rainforests. So whales clearly play a vital role in reducing greenhouse gas levels and providing us with clean air to breathe. So the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, has declared an unusual mortality event for humpback whales, unusual mortality event, or UME. The Marine Mammal Protection Act stipulates that every UME of marine mammals demands an immediate response. So we must ask, what is the immediate response and is it enough? NOAA has been conducting necropsies to determine the cause of death for these whales. Most of the necropsy results indicate that the whales died from vessel strike. So the explanation given is that we have more whales in our area and more vessel activity, so therefore we have more vessel strikes. But this explanation doesn't hold water. These whales died in the winter months when we have the lowest number of humpback whales in our area because most of the whales have migrated to the southern breeding and calving grounds. Humpbacks are off our coast mainly during the feeding season, which is from April to November. Now, it's during this time that we also have the greatest amount of vessel traffic with thousands of charter boats, party and recreational boats, plus cruise ships, in addition to the usual year-round shipping and commercial vessel traffic. So yeah, we weren't seeing whales getting struck by vessels and dying during these months. So why at a time when we have less whales and less vessel traffic, are we suddenly having more whales get struck by vessels and dying? What is different in our ocean now? Well, one thing that we know is that there are currently 12 incidental harassment authorizations, or IHAs, issued to numerous companies conducting offshore wind activities off the New Jersey coast. These IHAs are permits to harm or harass marine mammals by interfering with their migration, breeding, nursing, feeding, and sheltering. Level B harassment also includes temporary hearing threshold shift. Now, the total number of marine mammals allowed to be harassed is a staggering 75,924. And there are 5 more pending permits to harass over 100,000 more marine mammals. The current permits, except for one, are all level B, which allows for the disturbance of their behavior, but not to cause injury. However, we are seeing a lot of injuries to marine mammals. So we have to ask, is it possible that the extent of the disturbance has been underestimated? Is it possible that the harassment, while not a direct cause of death, could be a secondary cause of death for these whales? Now, determining vessel strike as the cause of death doesn't necessarily exonerate offshore wind vessel activity. Is it possible that the noise from the offshore wind vessels can cause the whales to become disoriented and therefore unable to avoid vessels? Or could the activity frighten the whales and cause them to flee, putting them in harm's way? Is it possible that the permitted IHA disturbances are what is causing the whales to end up in harm's way, thereby leading to their death? So when we ask these questions, the response is always, there is no evidence linking offshore wind surveying activities to the whale deaths. But you cannot find evidence if you don't look for it. So are there studies being conducted to determine the impact of the surveying activity on marine mammals? What about baseline studies and baseline monitoring of our marine mammal populations to assess their numbers, behavior, and distribution? The impact of offshore wind activities cannot be assessed if baseline data is not collected prior to the start of these activities. A 600% increase in whale strandings cannot be ignored. There are many unanswered questions, and we need to demand an immediate, independent, and thorough investigation into what is causing these deaths. And furthermore, there needs to be a pause on all offshore wind surveying activities until the proper baseline studies of our marine mammal populations can be conducted. Thank you.
Thank you. You indicated that there were some studies underway. Who's conducting these studies, and when do you anticipate that those studies will be complete?
Well, no, what I'm saying is there are no studies that I'm aware of. I'm asking the questions, are they conducting these studies? So I believe there's one study being conducted off the New York waters with acoustic monitoring. But as far as I know, there are no studies being conducted currently off the New Jersey waters to assess our marine mammal populations. There may be plans to do it, but they're not being conducted. And baseline studies are, the purpose of them is to do it prior to the work. That's what makes it a baseline. And I don't know of any baseline studies that are being conducted.
It would seem to me the baseline suggests that for years, incidents of whale deaths were extremely low along our coast. And now, as a result, once this activity has occurred, we're seeing huge spikes.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Correct.
Do the other senators have any questions?
Nope, thanks, Tricia.
Great testimony. I really appreciate it. And, this just plays into and reinforces the reason to have a moratorium on this work until such time as studies can be undertaken and completed to make sure there is not a direct correlation between the two. It seems to me like the both the Biden administration and the Murphy administration and the wind industry are adamant about how there's no connection, but yet these studies that would either confirm that or deny that, are not available or are not being conducted at this time, which to me is a problem.
Tony, sorry, Senator, could I just jump in real quick?
Sure.
Just a quick statement. The testimony we've already heard really troubles me. We like to take our leader's word and that everybody's acting in good faith. But this testimony, things that Cindy mentioned and Tricia, is directly in conflict with much that we've heard from the folks trying to convince us that these activities have nothing to do with these strandings and deaths. That really is troubling to me. And we're just to our first two testifiers. I'm open. I'm open and happy to accept the facts. But when we have things being told to us that are in direct conflict with reality, it's a problem. Again and again, we've been assured it's ship strikes, et cetera. But with this correlation of increased deaths when we're having a reduction in shipping and several other things have been said, it's a real problem. So I appreciate you guys being here. And while you're not helping provide clarity, you're helping us to understand that we need to ask more questions, and I appreciate it.
And I couldn't agree more. Senator. This is why, today's hearing is so important, because we haven't had a forum for folks to come out and give us the facts and, to explain the science. We've only heard from one side. And today's panel is extremely important. And I want to thank everybody that's been on so far for your testimony and shedding some light on this very troubling issue, because I don't think we have all the facts. I don't think there's been transparency in this area. I think that we're hearing only from one side, and we're being told, just accept what we tell you, but there's no science behind that. Nobody's looking at what historically has been the case off our shores.
Senator, if I may, and I just want to piggyback on those comments that were made by yourself and Senator O'Scanlan. What we are hearing so far today is diametrically opposed to the narrative that we've been being fed, and some people would say shoved down our throats. And, I know you, Senator Bucco, and myself are attorneys, and everybody else here, we're on a fact-finding mission. That's what we're here to do. We're trying to get to the actual facts and not just buy into a narrative that we're being told is backed up by science, but the science isn't necessarily being provided to us One of my constituents said it, better than I could encapsulate it. And he indicated that, the narrative now is regarding all of these whale deaths and dolphin deaths. We don't know exactly what it is, but we know for sure that it has nothing to do with any of the testing that's already been done. And that's where I am very disturbed by the further narrative that we just have to rush to judgment on this due to the never-ending chant of this is climate change and this is going to be good for, not only New Jersey, but for the rest of the United States. And I do want to give a shout out to Cape May County because so many people have been engaged in this, and there already have been a congressional hearing has been held there. And I would encourage everybody who's watching and or listening to go to capewindinfo.com so that they can watch that testimony as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. It just seems like the Murphy administration is burying its head in the sand here, so to speak. And unfortunately, that's where more and more whales are being buried. So with that, did anybody else have any other further questions? Okay, Mike?
Sorry.
Yeah, was that Brad that wanted to go or?
Oh yeah, I was gonna let Mike know that I have his slides ready for him.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thanks for that great segue too. I couldn't ask for anything better. I'm going to talk more about I'm going to try and focus mostly on the facts that we know about. And as Brad mentioned, I have a couple slides that'll probably give you maybe even some more concern and some more ammunition in this lively discussion. So again, senators, thank you for holding this and thank you for the opportunity to present these findings and thoughts. And I'm honored to be on the panel with Cindy and Tricia. My name is Mike Dean. I live in Monmouth County. I'm a retired former finance professional. I worked in asset backed and project finance for a long time. Currently, I'm an ocean advocate. I'm an independent researcher. Most of all, I'm a concerned New Jersey citizen with what's going on. I'm a taxpayer, I'm a ratepayer, and I vote. So just to set the table there, I wanted to shine some light on two important facts in our discussion here about the whale deaths. And it ties into everything everybody has just said. And I also have an observation at the end if time permits. So first on the whale deaths themselves, I have a couple different numbers, but I think I can explain them. Brad, if you could pull up the map. I don't know how this is going to show here, but okay, there we go. No, I'm sorry, the map of the whales, the first file I sent you. Go one more. No, I'm sorry. There was one other one. Maybe it was a link that you passed over, but we'll get to this quickly. So the first fact is we saw 16 whales stranded, dead, washed up on the shore or floating in the waters between south of Long Island, New York, and Cape May, New Jersey over the past 4 months. 16 whales in 4 months. I think Trish and Cindy both quoted 12. I think that's just washed up. What washed up in New Jersey and didn't count some of the ones in New York or maybe the floaters. I had them plotted on a map, but you can see it there. I'll provide a link later to the panel and for the public response to this. And as it was covered by both Cindy and Tricia, that's unprecedented in such a short period of time. Here it is here. So you can see all of them are listed here. You can go in and click on, they're mostly humpbacks. But to Cindy's point in answering, I think it was Senator Palestina's question, we've never seen anything like this in this small area in that short a time. So think about it, all this happened. The map covers a year, so it goes back to last May, but 3 of those were prior to December. So there's 19 on the map, 16 of them since December 3rd. And again, that's unprecedented and never happened before. And that's all. These are all confirmed by NOAA and the Marine Mammal Stranding Center. I update this map regularly. Sometimes we do it automatic. I do it as soon as the press reports come out, and then we confirm with with the NOAA and marine mammal stranding data. So these are facts. These aren't disputed for the lawyers on here. The second fact is we also saw, and you got a little preview of it there with the graph Brad passed through, but you can put that up now, Brad, if you want. At the same time, we saw that this unprecedented whale death activity, we saw a rapid increase in survey vessel activity in the same region, in those same waters, at the same time, and in very close proximity to where all those whales washed up or were found floating. And so taken together, I think here, I don't know if you've seen this chart before, but it's made its way around for about a month now. It's highly compelling as to correlation, both from, it's not a statistical exercise, it's basically data presentation. Just to be clear about what we're looking at here, I plotted the whale deaths cumulatively in the blue bars as they occurred over time. You can see the rapid increase beginning in December. And the survey vessels come from the U.S. Coast Guard local notice to mariners reports. They come out on a weekly basis. It's about a 100-page report. And within that is a section on offshore wind for each region, offshore wind vessel activity. So I took unfortunately for us, they split the New Jersey waters in half, beginning sort of at Sandy Hook up and south. And but taking the two regions, Region 1 and Region 5, you're able to tally all the vessels that are operating under an offshore wind banner in the New York, New Jersey waters, I call it. So that's what's plotted here. I smoothed it out with a 4-week average. It would bounce around a little bit, but you can see we've gone from about 2, 3 early in the last part of, or in the first half of 2022 to upwards of, I think we reached 11 boats. The 4-week average, as I said, smooths that out a little. But I think right now there's been 11 boats out there for about a month right now, and most of them have been further out. So again, I mean, to everybody's, we're singing the same tune here a little bit, but the claims of no evidence from the supporters of offshore wind, I mean, this is evidence. The dead whales alone are evidence of something happening, and the spate of dead whales is evidence. The survey vessels obviously are evidence. The ship whereabouts and where they're operating is evidence, and the ship tracks are evidence. So there's a lot of evidence out there. I think common sense will tell you something killed those. Common sense will tell you what killed those whales, but there's also a lot of evidence to support that conclusion. And I think at this point, based on what we know, the burden of proof is on the offshore wind companies to tell us why they're not responsible for these whale deaths. The second point I want to expose is the false claim we keep hearing, and somebody touched on it earlier. I think it was Senator Testa, that the whale date, I'm sorry, Senator Bucco, I think it was you, the whale deaths predate any offshore wind survey vessel activity. Now, that claim is that's not factual at all. And it gets repeated over and over again by many parties. If you can pull up the other map you pulled up first, Brad, I appreciate that, with the lease sites on it and the map. And I'm going to point you to the southern New England part of that, just off of Rhode Island, which is Block Island wind farm. That's at the COA. It's at Indian Quarries. Small red area. That's Block Island. Or that's the Block Island wind farm. Block Island is the white area right above it. That area was leased. It was the first lease of BOEM, Outer Continental Shelf, in 2013. They began construction, or they sited and surveyed that in 2014 and 15, and they began construction in 2016. It's a small wind farm. It came online in December of 2016 and was operational, has been operational ever since, with some, problems here and there. But since that time, in the 9 years from the time they leased that, I'm pointing to the screen. You can't, if you could focus your attention on the 9 lease areas off in southern New England, they were all leased since 2015 and 16 up until now. Some of our lease areas off of New Jersey were leased in that time as well, but siting and surveying and all kinds of pre-construction activity has been going on in the southern New England waters since 2016 and 2017. And that coincides precisely with the start of I won't use the acronyms, but the unusual mortality event that NOAA is studying for both humpbacks and minkas. So the idea that, or the claim that these whale deaths are predate any kind of survey activity is just not true. And we continue to hear it from a lot of different sources, from the offshore wind companies, the government agencies themselves spout it. You have conflicted environmental groups out there that are backing up the claims, and most notably the governor, who says it every month on his Ask the Governor show, that he dismisses it, any questions about the whales or any questions about offshore wind, and then ends it with, well, all that stuff happened before we started surveying. It's a cute way of getting around addressing the fact that offshore wind survey vessel activity is closely tied to whale deaths in the southern New England waters and the mid-Atlantic region since the beginning of the middle of the 2010 period. So they're the facts. They're the two simple facts I wanted to cover. I do have one thing to say too as well, but the two facts, again, the whale death spiked here in our area in tandem with a rapid increase in offshore wind survey vessel activity in the time frame we've been talking about. And then the second fact, obviously, we just covered the whales. They've been dying at an elevated rate in the southern New England and mid-Atlantic waters since offshore wind survey vessels have been active in that region. But I guess my one point I wanted to address too as well, if we have a little bit of time, a minute or so here. I think it's important to remember for everybody on here that the whale and dolphin deaths are just a part of the larger issue. I know we're here to talk about that today, but sadly, I personally believe they're likely a sign of worse things to come. We're at the beginning stages of what is and what has been called the largest transformation of a coastal ecosystem, in the history of mankind. And I'm not, trying to be over the top or anything. It's true. Nothing like this has ever been proposed or even attempted before. And it's proceeding. What's frightening as a citizen to sit back and watch this is the speed at which it's proceeding at the breakneck pace. Our citizens' concerns are many. They're not just tied to the whales, and our concerns have gone largely unaddressed, and quite frankly, they've been dismissed in an arrogant and an ignorant manner. I would have to add. Of course they're environmental and they're ecological, but they're also human health related and livelihoods and things like tourism that impact all of us, especially the senators on here from the shore regions like mine. And I don't want to belabor the whole list, but national security and mariner safety, horizon impairment, all these things come into play, and all these things they need to be addressed. And I don't think we just need to have hearings on them. Somebody needs to put a stop to this while we still can. These are not insignificant concerns. Just if I can just take a minute and point out the speed and recklessness. One example of that, you mentioned you talked to, I think, the commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection yesterday or the day before. So that's appropriate here, because Ocean Wind 1 just received their environmental permits from the DEP, basically to begin construction of their substations and their land-based cables, that portion of the project. they began that process. I'm sure they did a lot of background work, but they began the public part of that process. They held public hearings in the beginning of December. I was with Cindy at a hearing in at Hamilton High School in early December. Ironically, one of the first whales washed up that very day. So that was in, you know, Thanksgiving, early December timeframe, is when they started the public process. The public comment period ended, I think it was December 30th, whatever the last, you know, regular working day of September was. And it's now May 3rd. We're having public hearings on the well desk, and they're fully permitted for construction to start in less than four, you know, basically 4 months' time. They went through the entire process of getting New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection sign off on one of the most massive monumental projects in the history of not only our state, but the whole country in 4 months. And I mean, that needs to be addressed at some point and somehow, and it needs to be stopped. I mean, New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, they basically checked the boxes and put it on a glide path to approval, which they got last Friday. The New Jersey Board of Public Utilities is not unaccountable either. They cleared the decks and allowed that to happen by ensuring, but I mean, there's a law in place. I think we're all aware of it, the home rule law, but they took property from Ocean City and Cape May County and granted it to Orsted so they could continue with the approval process on the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection front. So
I don't want to cut you short because you've given us some excellent testimony, direct data that that is very concerning, you know, and the breakneck speed at which this is going at. I think everyone around the state should be concerned about it after seeing this data, and, you know, and just the common sense of being able to connect the data to the deaths, you know, and the fact that, you know, the Murphy administration just blindly says this is climate change. You can't just blindly say that when the data doesn't support it. I mean, the data does not support that. We've seen a tremendous rise. You pointed out the facts in New England. You've shown us off our coasts the direct impact and the tremendous surge as a result of this work being done. And what I don't think people have focused in on yet is that this is only the beginning. There is going to be, you know, a tremendous increase in disturbance off our coast as these wind farms begin to be developed. And if we don't do something to make sure that our environment is protected, it could be catastrophic. I couldn't agree more. Does anybody have any questions for Mike? Okay.
No,
Panel,
if I could just close out. I mean, I do want to thank you, Senator Bucko. It is you know, it is just the beginning, but they're moving fast, and it's going to get late fast as well. So you're our elected representatives. We need your help to stop this. We need your help to help us get out in front of this and stop it before construction starts. So before it's too late and before we lose the New Jersey Shore, as we all know and love it. So again, thank you.
We hope that today is that first step to getting people to focus in on the science and the data. And I hope that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will, you know, finally say, hey, okay, maybe there is something here, and not just blindly follow the governor's office on this without asking their own questions, right? Somebody has to ask these questions, and I'm happy to be leading the charge today to start asking these questions and hopefully bringing other concerned legislators and residents of the state on board so that people begin to listen. Thank you. Brad, if you bring the next panel in and we can introduce them.
Sure. So our next panel is Mayor Paul Kinitra from Point Pleasant Beach, Craig Rucker from CFAC based in Washington, and Dr. Bob Stern from State LBI. So maybe we can start with Mayor Kinitra.
Thank you. Mayor, It's good to see you.
Sorry, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes,
We can hear you, Mayor.
There we go.
ahead.
Sorry, I'm in DC, about to go up to a meeting on the Hill. So apologies for doing this from my car. And I just want to thank you, Senator Bucco, Senator O'Scanlan, Senator Testa, and Senator Palestina for hosting this important panel and for giving us the opportunity to provide testimony on the recent marine mammal deaths occurring along the coast of New Jersey and even throughout our surrounding states. I'm really grateful to have been asked to provide this testimony, and quite frankly, I believe my position as a Jersey Shore Beach Town mayor offers a unique perspective that's important here. We've been providing comment on this since my administration came into office, and we're encouraged to see momentum finally gaining on common sense. As I mentioned earlier, I'm Paul Knitzer. I'm the mayor of Point Pleasant Beach. For everybody who doesn't know, we're an idyllic, vibrant beachfront community of 4,700 residents. We grow to about 20,000 people living in town in the summer and 50,000 people from all over the tri-state area enjoying our town on a busy day in the summertime. And we're in the northeast corner of Ocean County. Now, I personally hear from countless residents, small businesses, and visitors every single week that they do not want to see, hear, or experience the impacts of offshore wind development in my town. They know offshore wind would devastate our on-land quality of life. Now, the hypocrisy here is palatable considering that we as beach town mayors were frankly all against offshore oil and gas drilling a couple of years back, and there was no argument from the left on that front at that time. But now we face the exact same industrialization of the ocean just from wind, and their tune has changed dramatically. So what's the major difference here? I've always felt from the beginning it was the dollars at stake and which groups would benefit. My fear is with so many billions of dollars on the table that this project will never be assessed objectively. And obviously, as mentioned just previously, we have a very short period of time to have any change here. We've heard that the state is committed to buying energy from these projects at 3 times the kilowatt hour price that we currently pay. Can one of your staffs look into that? We've already spent $500 million in taxpayer money building out infrastructure. How is that possible? And what else is there coming online that our taxpayers are going to have to pay so that Governor Murphy's profile gets raised, his green profile gets raised for his presidential run? Now, to give you an idea of what's going on out there, it's staggering. Offshore wind is sponsoring groups and events across the state. I personally resigned from one well-known such group that had offshore wind lackeys spoon-feeding us false information as facts. They're spreading money around left and right to elected officials. There are offshore wind-sponsored grant opportunities for local projects. The money is massive. They are simply buying support. If this project was so great on its own, why would they need to be doing this? So let's say the quiet parts out loud here. It's not just whales and dolphins that have us opposed to this as beach town mayors. It's the multitude of detrimental effects to our towns and our state, which I'm going to get into in a little bit. But if the administration also said the quiet part out loud, they'd have to own up to the fact that this project has nothing to do with green energy, and they could care less about whale and dolphin deaths. It has to do with multinational corporations standing to make billions of dollars and therefore spending whatever is necessary to craft a narrative that gets them that money and defrauds the public in the process. So we're speaking of dollars here. Let's talk about the other side of the equation. Let's talk about our local economy, my local economy, the massive detrimental effects to our local economies. Our local economy is enormously dependent on tourism, and we're home in Point Pleasant Beach to the second most profitable fishing port in the state. One of our local co-ops produces on average about $15 million in business. That's nearly our entire municipal budget. Now, on another front, offshore wind has been estimated to contribute to a 15% drop in tourism activity. People simply don't want to have the calm and peaceful ocean industrialized. In 2020, tourism in New Jersey supported over 200,000 jobs and contributed $15 billion to the state's GDP. And in Ocean County alone, where I am, tourism is a $5 billion industry and supports over 40,000 jobs. To get in a little bit more on the fisheries impacts, offshore wind project companies have estimated and assured our shell fishing businesses that they'll be able to drift about 2 miles in between the turbines. But the current projects have shown only 1 mile available in between the turbines. Notwithstanding the implausibility of operating in less than 2 miles between the turbines, the likelihood that these boats will be able to operate amongst the turbines in each area is very slim for security reasons. With Murphy's commitment of the use of only renewable energy by 2040, and given the state's proximity to large cities and one of the most profitable ports, Port Elizabeth on the East Coast, these offshore wind projects will likely be deemed off limits by the Federal Department of Homeland Security. So it's not unthinkable that the same restrictions are going to apply to areas in Barnegat Bay as well, where transmission cabling is going to be buried and connected to BL England and Oyster Creek. Simply put, our commercial and recreation fisheries operations will be decimated. Now I want to talk a little bit about the impact of offshore wind to humans. Despite what offshore wind funded studies say to the contrary, no one wants to look at or hear offshore wind turbines on their beach vacation. We all know that. There are some estimates by acousticians that suggest that the whirring of a wind turbine project will be heard at 118 decibels at the turbine itself. Now, to put that in perspective, rock concerts are 120 decibels. Now, imagine the sound of a wind farm operating at rock concert levels over open water. Our residents and small business owners know the impact that offshore wind is going to have on their livelihoods, and they're rightfully worried about the future of their property values and operations in Point Pleasant Beach and up and down the New Jersey coastline. In an early April meeting that we had with BOEM, they estimated that the visual impact of wind farm projects in the New York Bight could possibly be seen as far west as Brick or Howell or Wall Township. So everybody needs to put that in perspective. One thing very important that I think hopefully you guys could maybe help with was local home rule. It was effectively eliminated in Senate Bill 3629 in 2021 under the cover of night during state budget voting sessions on 6/24. I personally called President Sweeney when I saw this before the vote, and I was told nothing could be done to stop it. Now, this bill, which is now law, overrides the local zoning approval for renewable energy utility infrastructure. And it isn't just a pipe dream, it's already happened in Ocean City, New Jersey. The locals declined Ørsted's request to use the bridge to run cabling over the bay to the onshoring site. This law permitted Ørsted to submit their appeal to the State Board of Public Utilities, whose board was cherry-picked and appointed by Governor Murphy. And then the NJBPU voted to approve Ørsted's approval despite Ocean City's opposition. We sure could use your help in getting our home rule back, perhaps with a bill or an amendment to do so. And real quickly, sorry, go ahead.
I'm just going to thank you, Mayor. You've touched on some great points. I just had a quick question for you. I know the answer to this question, but perhaps some that may be watching may not. What is the method of disposal of the whales and dolphins when they wash up on the beach? Because I'm sure you've experienced this.
That's a very good question, Senator. And the first thing that I'll lead with is I get photos from our fishing fleet and captains out there all the time of whales that never make it to shore. So we're sitting here talking about all the whales that wind up on the beach. What about the whales that simply float out in the ocean until they decompose to the point where they sink to the bottom? And I have personally seen photos of that and know that that's an issue. But then when they come to shore, small towns like Point Pleasant Beach are totally responsible for the removal of them. Obviously there's necropsies that are done, and they bring in Marine Mammal Stranding Center and other groups as well. But we have to, at taxpayer expense, we either have to bury them in the sand or we have to cart them away.
What happens when you bury them in the sand? I mean, it would seem to me that at some point there's going to be a big hole in the sand. It's like when you bury tree stumps in your yard. The next thing you know, you got a big sinkhole.
It's not the most viable option, I can tell you, which is why most of the time now they're getting put on 18 wheelers. The size of these things is massive, and then they're getting transported to dumps.
And your municipality is responsible for footing the bill.
Unfortunately, yes.
Well, I wanted to give a chance to the other senators to see if they had any questions of you, Mayor, before you have to run. Any of the senators on the call have any questions for the mayor? Seeing none, I can tell you, Mayor, that I'm one of those New Jersey residents that visits your municipality during the summer quite often, and it is a great place to be. So we want to keep it that way.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. I think how you opened up this panel was so vitally important, Senator. You mentioned that it's not just a shore issue, and you know the economic impacts of this resonate throughout New Jersey. And I'm grateful to you to bringing that up, and I just hope that you all are able to get to the bottom of this money grab and address all the concerns.
We certainly hope that today's the first step. Thank you, Mayor. Okay, our next witness, Craig.
Thank you. Let me start by saying this is a wonderful panel, and I commend you all for bringing it together. It's a pleasure to speak here to the New Jersey Senate Republicans today. My name's Craig Rucker. I serve as the president of the Washington, D.C. based Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow, which is a mouthful. That's why we call it CFACT. Our organization's been around since 1985. We serve to promote free market, safe technological solutions to issues of energy, environment, and development. Now, among the many issues we engage in, we take particular interest in this matter surrounding whales and offshore wind energy. It's our contention that the reckless net zero or clean energy policies that are currently being pursued by the Biden administration, as well as certain governors and agencies at both the national and state level, are doing irreparable harm to our natural world, and they should be halted until further research is undertaken to assess their impacts. Now, I'll get to the specifics as to why we believe this in a minute, but I think it's instructive to review how we got ourselves here in the first place. This began with this mad push for offshore wind energy is being driven largely by fears of man-made climate change, as has been expressed earlier. President Biden, like his predecessor, Barack Obama, has made clear he believes the climate crisis is an existential threat to the planet. He's undertaken what he calls a whole of government approach to tackling it. Now, my organization, CFACT, has participated as a recognized NGO in virtually every major United Nations climate gathering since the 1990s. In full disclosure, we would dispute the president's assertions of doom and gloom and the urgency to act with reckless abandon in pursuing so-called green energy, such as offshore wind. There have been several stalwart believers in what the UN and Green Movement have been peddling on the climate and have publicly now broken ranks with this narrative. I'd recommend reading books by best-selling authors such as Bjorn Lomborg, Michael Schellenberger, and Steve Koonin to get a sense of how this issue has been blown out of proportion. You can also visit our websites at cfact.org and climatedepot.com to do the same. But my point here is, even if we did share the view of our president, the actions he's taking on offshore wind are reckless and totally irresponsible. Biden's clean energy plan calls for fossil fuel use to plummet in the arena of electricity generation by 80% by 2030 and 100% by 2035. To achieve this, he's directed the Interior Department, Commerce, and the DOE to push some 30,000 megawatts of wind energy off our eastern coast by 2030. This would mean placing about 3,000 wind turbines stretching from the Carolinas to Massachusetts out at sea around 10 to 30 miles off our shores. These turbines would be the tallest wind turbines in the world, reaching many of them about 750 feet in the air at their shaft, their propellers to as high as 800 feet or more. To give context, the Washington Monument's only around 554 feet. These turbines have a lot of concerns surrounding them. Leave alone the fact that they're made from rare earths typically derived from China and are not reliable sources of energy, and they're intermittent in their nature. They're also being placed right smack in areas where whales migrate up and down the eastern coast. These include sperm, humpback, and right whales, as well as dozens of others. Why do we think wind farms are a potential threat? Well, as has been voiced in this thing here, namely because of the correlation between the when the projects for siting the wind farms commenced in 2016 and when the numbers of whales started beaching themselves. Since the issuance of incidental harassment authorizations began in 2016, there's been a precipitous rise in the whale deaths on our eastern shore. NOAA admits it's been studying what it calls quote unquote unusual mortality events involving about 174 humpback whales along the East Coast since January 2016. While some government spokesmen claim the year 2016 predates when the wind turbine construction started occurring, that's not entirely accurate. One of our chief researchers on this subject, a former DOE expert named David Wojcik, uncovered that in 2016 there were activities being carried out, namely geotechnical and site characterization surveys. These surveys were actually licensed by NOAA Fisheries and were themselves granted IHAs. Why is this important? Because these surveys typically include the protracted use of what Mr. Wojcik calls machine gun sonar. This is a shipboard device that typically emits an incredible loud noise several times a second, often for hours at a time, as ships slowly map the bottom of the seafloor. To date, NOAA Fisheries has issued permits for an astounding 46 of these surveys, so it's perhaps little wonder the whales would be impacted by this. Now, as has also been said in this panel, let me state we're not suggesting the sonar is the main culprit definitively behind the recent whale beachings. We understand that correlation doesn't mean causation. However, it does raise concerns and it's worth taking a look at. The linking of sonar to whale deaths has troubled environmentalists for years. In fact, there's been lawsuits filed against the Navy to change its use of sonar to accommodate whale activity. The Ninth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals in California, in fact, in 2016, ruled that the low-frequency active sonar, or LFA systems, used by the U.S. Navy for training missions violates the Marine Mammal Protection Act. Why? Because it negatively impacts whales, dolphins, and walruses who rely on sound to navigate the seas. The LFA system employed by the Navy for use in its training exercise used 18 underwater speakers to pulse low-frequency sounds at about 215 decibels for roughly 60 seconds a pop. While that doesn't seem like much, these sounds can travel literally hundreds of miles and are found in roughly 70% of the world's oceans, and it can interrupt the daily activities of marine mammals. It can cause them to have stress, stop their communications and mating practices, and even separates them from their calves, according to the Ninth Circuit. The decibel level of the sonar testing for the offshore wind, where you are at, is not far removed from that which the Navy used, often reaching near 200 decibels. The monopile driving to place the wind turbines in the ground can also reach that level or higher, as well as the operational sound of giant wind turbines once they're up and running, according to our research. This presents a clear and present danger to all whale species, especially the right whale, of which there's only around 350 or so which remain in the wild. Finally, I'd like to say the government knows this, and to the shame they're giving the wind energy industry a pass. Why do we say this? Because the level B harassment, again, the IHAs that are being given consideration by NOAA to protect is going to protect various companies from putting up the wind farms from liability against killing whales. As noted by David Wojcik, there are at least 8 offshore wind take authorizations being considered that we're following. And if they're approved, as seems likely, this would amount to the government permitting a staggering 708 whales to be potentially killed. What this means is these companies could be given license to take not just all 100% of the current right whale population, but up to 208% if that were possible. Again, there's only 350 in the wild, but these authorizations could essentially wipe that species off the face of the earth. Mr. Chairman, this is unacceptable. It's for this reason that we at CFAC, in partnership with our allies at the Heartland Institute and Cesar Rosny Institute, are poised to take legal action against one of these projects off the shores of Virginia. It's our hope the Senate Republicans in New Jersey will join this fight and do all you can to prevent the deployment of these mega offshore wind farms until more study can be done to assess their impacts on whales and other marine life. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Insightful testimony. Does any of the other senators have any questions?
Nope.
No, Senator.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to our third panelist, Dr. Bob Stern, Save LBI.
Hi, can you hear me? Good. Well, thank you very much, senators, for holding this hearing. We think it's long overdue that some of these issues can be examined thoughtfully as opposed to just getting sort of knee-jerk responses in press releases and so on. My name's Bob Stern. I'm heading up the organization called Save Long Beach Island. We do have now about 8,000 supporters, not just people who reside on LBI, but people who visit here from all over the state and the country. We have been concerned for quite a while about the siting of these projects. I won't repeat a lot of what Mayor Kenitra said, but the extreme proximity to shore of some of these projects is unprecedented around the world. None of these modern projects are being sited as close as they are in New Jersey. And that brings with it visible impact, as well as been mentioned, audible noise from the turbines will be heard at the shore. There will be reduced breeze at the shore, higher temperature at the shore, higher humidity at the shore, because the wind turbines are extracting a good part of the wind energy that we would normally receive. In addition to that, as has been mentioned, some of these areas are right in migration corridors of critically endangered whales. And I believe that about half of the site off LBI is in a Department of Defense exclusion zone, which we need to examine further. Coming back to the vessel surveys and the whale deaths, this is not a new issue for us, unfortunately. Over a year ago, when Marine Fisheries was considering approval of these vessel surveys, we commented extensively to them that they were underestimating the noise impacts. They were assuming that the noise devices were too low. They were assuming that the noise dissipates too rapidly, and they were using the wrong criteria. I would also mention for representatives north of LBI, the geographical scope of these surveys is far beyond what's needed to address the projects in the south. The scope goes all the way up the shore to Raritan Bay and even out a bit to Long Island. And one of the first things we asked of Marine Fisheries and Bureau of Ocean Energy Management was, why are you surveying up the shore if this is to characterize the seabed for the projects down south? And after a little searching, the answer was that they are looking for new sites along the shore, not just for transmission cables, but for wind turbines. And so I would suggest that any folks who think this is just an LBI problem should look very hard at what is actually going on here, because this is just the beginning of a much larger effort that will encompass everybody. When we saw the whale deaths coming, then we were especially upset because it looked like, well, it didn't look like, it was, in fact, that our concerns expressed a year ago were not heeded. And we did our own calculations. And just as an example, using the numbers that Marine Fisheries uses, the elevated noise levels only extend 1/10 of a mile from the vessel, which would not be bad. Using realistic numbers, those elevated noise levels extend tens of miles from the vessels. And so, as previous panelists have indicated, you're now facing multiple vessels out there using noise devices, and those devices cause noise levels going 10, 15 miles out away from the vessels that will disturb the whale's behavior. And so it does not take a rocket scientist to ask for an examination of the correlation between the vessel surveys and the recent whale deaths. I would also like to amplify the comments made that this is just the tip of the iceberg. The operational noise levels from these turbines, from these larger turbines, are much, much higher than what has been experienced from the smaller turbines that have been installed overseas. And we commented extensively on this. In fact, we wrote a letter to President Biden laying out all the numbers, but the short of it is that the noise levels from turbine operation will extend 80 miles from the source, from the project, at levels which the whale will avoid. So essentially, you're setting up projects off New Jersey that will block the migration of these whales. And we were hoping and still hope that the president takes heed of this, because the site selection process, as previously described, has just been seriously flawed. And similar concerns occur with respect to the pile driving impacts for construction. The assumptions made there, again, I just inexplicable in terms of the optimism that marine fisheries seems to be applying here. So I would suggest that you may want to consider this process and explore the operational turbine impacts, the pile driving impacts as well. And so, as previously suggested, this does call for a halt. It calls for some thought. The responses that we have received from the agencies really have no substance. I won't repeat what other panelists have said, but they really do not account for the spike that we have seen. And the only way to get a handle on this is to take a hard look at where the vessels were at the time the whale deaths occurred, what noise devices were being used, and what power inputs were being used to those devices. And you need to try to see whether there's a correlation between those two. And then I would just suggest one other thing here. I know the DEP commissioner at one point said that there was no cases or evidence of correlation of seismic surveys with whale strandings. And that is simply not correct. There are hundreds of cases worldwide where seismic surveys and whale strandings have occurred simultaneously, and governments, many governments overseas, investigate those, and they may temporarily pause in operations and change operations. We do not, unfortunately, have cases of that in the US because we do not look at those correlations. When they occur, we simply do not investigate them, as is the case now. And so, yes, there are no recorded cases of that correlation in the US, but it's not because it may not be occurring. It's just we don't examine it. So again, I would thank you very much for pursuing this. I would hope this is the first of several, so we can explore these issues. And as many have indicated, let's just apply some science here and some common sense as to what we're doing.
Thank you, Doctor. From all the panelists today, it seems that one thing is for sure, that from the start till today, this process has not been a fair, open, and transparent process for people to be able to submit their concerns and get direct answers, and that's unfortunate. So I am glad that we're doing this today, because I think that everyone's expertise today has shown that there are definitely issues that need to be investigated, and that certainly a call for a pause why that occurs is certainly not unreasonable based on the scientific evidence that we've seen so far today. So I want to thank the second panel for your time and for your testimony. And Brad, maybe we can bring in the last panel now,
Well, I think-
unless
I
anybody
think-
has any questions. Sorry about that. Senator
I believe
Testa?
Senator Testa is, yeah.
Yes, Senator, thank you. And this is for both panelists, Dr. Stern and Mr. Rucker. Have you seen, or have either of you seen any studies regarding how much of a positive impact this project would have in the elimination of greenhouse gases? You know, I've been given a lot of information from constituents and other concerned citizens that are not within my legislative district that they've seen studies that say the ultimate positive impact that this project would have if fully built out is actually zero.
That's a great question. As you know, in New Jersey, we rely primarily on nuclear energy and natural gas now for our electric supply. And so displacing some natural gas with offshore wind, if you just look at New Jersey, that might have some modest reduction in greenhouse gases, but that's not the way the energy supply system works. We are, as you know, we are part of a grid that shares energy with Pennsylvania, Virginia, other states. And that's a good thing, because then when one state has a deficit on a certain day, another state can supply that energy, and each state doesn't have to build out to a maximum capacity. But now, when New Jersey will have, assumedly, offshore wind energy, which is intermittent, it's not available all the time. So if Pennsylvania, say, is having a bad day, we will not be able to supply energy to Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania may now have to crank up a coal plant to supply the energy for their folks. So when you look at this on a regional basis, it's not clear at all whether greenhouse gases will go up or down. And that analysis, as far as I know, has not been done. So unfortunately,
Doctor, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
I would like to say that we are looking into that issue. We have a project called the Net Zero Reality Coalition, which is actually formed for that purpose, to look at what projects like this are doing. We haven't derived an answer for this specific project as of yet. However, it is a contention of the scientists and researchers we have on that actually it might increase greenhouse gases when you take into account the manufacture, the transport, and all the different components in there. So I know the Biden administration has some figures on this, but we would dispute them and be happy to get back to you with an exact answer to your question if you care to find out.
Well, Mr. Rucker, and that's exactly why this is supposed to be, hopefully the first of many. And Dr. Stern, I really appreciate your answer, because, our energy portfolio in the state of New Jersey is 50% natural gas, 40% nuclear energy, and 10% other, and we are part of the PJM. So I appreciate it. I know we have other panelists who are now let in the room. One thing I'd like to say, again, fisheries are integral to many of the legislative districts, but in particular for my legislative district out of Cape May County, the administration and these companies such as Ørsted are indicating to the commercial fishing industry that they are in fact able to, harvest right near the turbines, when in fact that's simply not true. The administration may be allowing them, but they're not taking into account insurance companies like Lloyd's of London, who actually insure all of these ships, which are not going to insure these ships if they are in fact trying to harvest so close to all of these turbines. So it goes to show you that they haven't really spoken to the real stakeholders that are involved in the commercial fishing industry, as well as the recreational fishing industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Great questions. Mr. Rucker, if you could provide that information on the greenhouse gases to our office, that would be great. And we'll have it disseminated to the other panelists. We appreciate some great testimony. And we'll move on to panel 3. Brad, you want to introduce panel 3?
Senator Bucco, I got to jump in. I apologize, but I do have another engagement I have to get to, and I got to bounce now. Great information. I appreciate everybody being here. Obviously, you, Senator Bucco, for putting this together. Hopefully, it is the start of a little different conversation where we can use our unified collective voices to try to get some answers on these topics, and really appreciate everybody's time. Headed now over to Stockton for the ribbon cutting on their phase 2 at their campus in Atlantic City. So I unfortunately have to go, but again, thanks everybody, and we'll talk soon.
We completely understand, and you've been a great advocate down there for this, so good luck.
Thank you.
All right, so we have our next panel. We have some people representing fishing. So we have Megan Lapp, who's from Seafreeze, representing the commercial side. And we have Jim Hutchison from the Fisherman magazine. He's the editor. And so Megan, perhaps you can start.
Megan, it was a great lead, and I don't know if you heard Senator Testa's questions of the last panel. So it was a great lead into your testimony. So go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you very much, senators, for having me here today, even though I'm not from New Jersey, and hopefully I can provide you with some useful information. My name is Megan Lapp, and I'm the fisheries liaison for Seafreeze, a commercial fishing company based in Rhode Island. We own and operate 5 commercial fishing vessels and 2 shoreside facilities. In my role, I'm intimately involved in the NOAA regulatory environment. I read NOAA documents and notices on a regular basis. I provide comments on NOAA Federal Register notices, etc. So today I want to read to you from NOAA's own documents, because rather than take my word for it, I want the senators and the public to hear from NOAA itself. I think that that's important because I'm sure that many of you have seen NOAA's press statements on the whale deaths off of New Jersey, denying that the ongoing offshore wind farm surveys could possibly be or are connected to the whale deaths. But that's not what their own documentation states. What I'm about to read are not my words, not my allegations or conjectures. These statements are taken directly from a proposed rule published by NOAA in the Federal Register on February 10th, 2023, entitled Take Some Marine Mammals Incidental to Specified Activities, Taking Marine Mammals Incidental to the Sunrise Wind Offshore Wind Farm Project offshore New York. But before I read from this document, I want to set the stage for what an incidental take authorization is and what kinds there are, because understanding that is important in this conversation. Under the Marine Mammal Protection Act, NOAA is authorized to issue incidental take authorizations, which allow certain levels of harm to marine mammals as incidental to other ocean activities. The 2 types of authorizations are an incidental harassment authorization, or IHA, and a letter of authorization, or LOA. An IHA is typically what is issued for offshore wind site characterization surveys and is good for 1 year, while an LOA is typically what is issued for construction activities and is and post-construction surveys and is good for 5 years. Both IHAs and LOAs can authorize level A and level B harassment of marine mammals, but only an LOA can authorize serious injury or death. If a wind developer or anyone possessing an IHA or LOA exceeds the allowable levels of harassment or injury that have been authorized to them, the authorization may be revoked. NOAA currently has 14 active incidental take authorizations permitted for offshore wind activities on the East Coast, 15 in the process of being renewed or reviewed for issuance, and 34 expired authorizations dating back to 2014/2015 through 2022/2023. The numbers of these have increased in recent years as offshore wind leasing and development activities have also increased. The 2 other terms that you need to be familiar with are TTS and PTS. TTS stands for temporary threshold shift and is temporary deafness for marine mammals. PTS stands for permanent threshold shift and is permanent deafness for marine mammals. TTS, or temporary deafness, is considered level B harassment and is not considered injury by NOAA. PTS, or permanent deafness, is considered auditory injury and is categorized as level A harassment. Most IHA for site characterization surveys, such as the IHA issued to Atlantic Shores off New Jersey, for example, request authorization for level B harassment. Here's a statement from a previously issued Atlantic Shores IHA. Quote, underwater sound resulting from Atlantic Shores planned site characterization surveys has the potential to result in incidental take of marine mammals in the form of behavioral harassment, i.e. level B harassment only. The estimated duration of the surveys is expected to be up to 350 total days, including 210 survey days within the lease area and 140 survey days within the cable export route area between April 2020 and April 2021. This schedule is based on 24-hour operations and includes potential downtime due to inclement weather. With that all said, here's where it gets interesting. I'll begin reading verbatim off of NOAA's Federal Register notice for the Sunrise Wind Project, which gets at the real issues surrounding the temporary and permanent threshold shifts and level B and level A harassment. I quote, generally speaking, level B harassment take estimates based on these behavioral harassment thresholds are expected to include any likely takes by TTS. TTS of a sufficient degree can manifest as behavioral harassment, as reduced hearing sensitivity and the potential reduced opportunities to detect important signals, conspecific communication, predators, prey, and may result in changes in behavior patterns that would not otherwise occur. TTS can have effects on marine mammals ranging from discountable to serious, depending on the degree of interference of marine mammals' hearing. For example, a marine mammal may be able to readily compensate for a brief, relatively small amount of TTS in a non-critical frequency range that occurs during a time when ambient noise is lower and there are not as many competing sounds present. Alternatively, a larger amount and longer duration of TTS sustained during time when communication is critical, e.g. for successful mother-calf interactions, consistent detection of prey, could have more serious impacts. Currently, TTS data only exist for 4 species of cetaceans: bottlenose dolphin, beluga whale, Harper porpoise, and Yangtze finless porpoise. There is currently no data available on noise-induced hearing loss for mysticetes, end quote. Mysticetes are low-frequency baleen whales, such as humpback whales, fin whales, sei whales, and North Atlantic right whales. It's been primarily humpbacks and other mysticetes washing up on New Jersey and other East Coast beaches. Now listen to this, also from NOAA's Federal Register notice. I quote, marine mammals exposed to high intensity sound or to lower intensity sound for prolonged periods can experience hearing threshold shift. Threshold shifts can be permanent, in which case there is an irreversible increase in the threshold of audibility at a specified frequency or portion of an individual's hearing range, or temporary, in which there is reversible increase in the threshold of audibility at a specified frequency or portion of an individual's hearing range, and the animal's hearing threshold would fully recover over time. Repeated sound exposure that leads to TTS could cause PTS. When PTS occurs, there can be physical damage to the sound receptors in the ear, i.e. tissue damage, whereas TTS represents primarily tissue fatigue and is reversible. In addition, other investigators have suggested that TTS is within the normal bounds of physiological variability and tolerance and does not represent physical injury. Therefore, National Marine Fisheries Service does not consider TTS to constitute auditory injury. Relationships between TTS and PTS thresholds have not been studied in marine mammals, and there is no PTS data for cetaceans, end quote. Cetaceans include whales, dolphins, and porpoises. So what NOAA says officially is this: they're authorizing offshore wind companies to conduct site characterization surveys, which operate 24 hours a day for many days on end, that could lead to temporary deafness in whales, which can lead to changes in behavior and impairment. Repeated sound exposure can cause temporary deafness to turn into permanent deafness. But while they're authorizing this, they do not have any information on how much noise causes hearing loss in low-frequency baleen whales, and they have no information whatsoever on what levels cause permanent deafness in any kind of whale. So the fact is that NOAA is authorizing activities that it cannot enforce, measure, or monitor because it does not have the science to do so. I'll let the senators and the public decide for themselves whether they think a moratorium is necessary to determine these thresholds and impacts prior to continuing with development. And thank you, senators, for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much. Senator Testa, Senator O'Scanlan, do you have any questions?
I actually do. Ms. Lapp, I have to say that was extremely informative. The temporary threshold shift versus the permanent threshold shift as it relates to deafness, because what we're being consistently told is that this level of testing that has been done contributes zero to any of these mammals who are washing up on our shores. And it's been startling. And again, the narrative that we're being fed is that this has been an ongoing problem since 2016. And I know myself and Senator O'Scanlan, Senator Palestina, and various other senators and assembly members and our constituents are simply saying to us, well, if this has been going on since 2016, how come we haven't seen this happen before, especially at these levels? So, I guess the question becomes, and this is a rhetorical question, it's not specifically for you, Ms. Lapp, but, how much, I'm labeling these mammals washing up on our shores as collateral damage in the sense to their agenda, to a radical agenda, and I believe it to be, is, how much collateral damage is enough for them to wake up and say, hey, we should probably listen to this call for a moratorium, which, by the way, has been bipartisan in nature and now has been the subject of, a congressional hearing in my legislative district by our Congressman Jeff Van Drew. I think that there are so many people, shouting from the rooftop, so to speak, and from our shores, that people should be listening. And again, if we want to follow the science, we should follow the scientific method. And if we pause for 30 days or 60 days and these, mammals continue to wash up on our beaches, then we can know for a fact that it probably isn't due to the testing. But until we do that, how can we truly know? And, I've pointed out the hypocrisy, Ms. Lapp. I don't know if you've been on the entire time, that, Greenpeace and the Sierra Club, if this were at all for offshore drilling and there were one whale that washed up on any of our shores in the state of New Jersey, they would be surrounding that whale, holding hands, singing Kumbaya with tears streaming down their face. But despite the fact that all of these whales and dolphins have washed up on our shores, it's simply nothing to see here. We don't know exactly what it is that's causing this, but we know it's not the testing for these massive wind farms.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. Yes, I've seen a lot of the press releases where, folks are coming out and saying, oh, no, it has nothing to do with this. But NOAA's own documents say they're issuing authorization to cause temporary deafness, but they really don't know what threshold that is, but they're going to issue it anyway. And I think, something to keep in mind is that if this is the correlation between the whale deaths and the surveys, construction is much, much louder than the surveys. And I've been reviewing some of the NOAA documents for those as well. And what's very interesting is that none of them are the same. None of them, the data that is provided to NOAA in applications on impacts, those analyses are conducted by the developers themselves. And I've seen applications by the same developer, which are using totally different methodologies. So there's not a standard method by which they're assessing impacts to marine mammals in all of the different site surveys, all of the different construction applications. And what was interesting to me, because I know most of the whales that were washing up in New Jersey were humpback whales, was that I did see one developer application off the coast of Rhode Island, and the only whale that they expected to injure was humpback whales. And when NOAA asked them, why only humpbacks? Why do you think you're only going to harm humpbacks? They said, well, because we think that the humpbacks can hear for a further distance. So even if we have a shutdown zone, the humpbacks will probably still get whacked. even if we shut down, if we see a whale within so close of a vessel or so close of a pile driving activity. So
Ms. Lapp,
know,
I don't want to interrupt you, but what you're saying a lot, and it's all great stuff for us, for our knowledge base. I mean, you certainly appear to be extremely knowledgeable on the subject, but what you're saying, and this is for the people who are listening, is that they knew that this was a very real risk, and now we're seeing the unfortunate fruits of that risk. And I have one question, obviously, because you represent the commercial fishing industry, which is integral to my legislative district and really integral to the state and beyond. What concerns does the commercial fishing industry have related to the wind farms and how they may directly impact fishing operations, immediately and beyond?
Well, I guess there'd be three categories that. Number one, with our gear, we won't be able to operate our vessels and our gear in the wind farm, right? So now it's an exclusion zone for us. Number two, we won't be able to safely transit through a wind farm because offshore wind farms interfere with marine vessel radar. So radar are your eyes. Now you're not safe. Now you're going to have to go around them. And number three, wind farms are shown to have very significant ecological impacts as well. So if they ecologically impact the species that we rely on for harvest, that's another compounding factor, right? So those are the three real problems for us. And quite frankly, I've said it before, offshore wind is the single greatest existential threat to commercial fishing in the United States of America right now.
Well, unfortunately, Ms. Lapp, this administration, the Biden administration, unfortunately see human beings as the invasive species. That's how I've seen it, and that's how I'll characterize it. But thank you so much for your testimony. It's extremely knowledgeable, and I really can't thank you enough.
Ms. Lapp, Senator Scanlon here, I'll thank you as well. Again, we continue throughout this hearing to mount the case, at the very least, that the folks on the other side of these issues who are definitively saying they know what's causing this have not a leg to stand on. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lapp. I join my colleagues. Some powerful testimony. It just adds to the facts that we've heard today that support, a common sense slowdown or moratorium on this approach. There's impacts, across the board, and nobody seems to be paying attention. And if they are paying attention, then shame on them because they don't care. And that's troubling to me. So thank you. We're going to move on to Mr. Hutchinson, who's the editor of the Fisherman Magazine.
Thank you, Senators. Hopefully you can you guys hear me? Wonderful. Thank you. I want to thank you all for putting this together. And Senator Testa, you mentioned something before about collateral damage, and we're really feeling like the recreational fishing community has been collateral damage in that. My name is Jim Hutchinson. I live in Brick Township. I was born in Atlantic County. I'm managing editor of the New Jersey Delaware Bay edition of the Fisherman Magazine. It was a magazine, it's been a magazine dedicated to the recreational fishing community of the Garden State since 1973. Before I get into a couple of quotes, I started my career many years ago as a freelance reporter, Shore newspapers, worked for an award-winning local radio station that was built on news. But for the past 21 years, my job is focused exclusively on news affecting local anglers and the recreational community as a whole. I'm proud to say that my bosses, the ones who pay my bills, are recreational fishermen who read the magazine, and the for-hire fleet, the tackle shops, the marinas, and the national manufacturers who pay to advertise there. As a journalist in the fishing industry in New Jersey, my research into industrial wind began sometime in 2018. As Mike Dean had mentioned before, the pre-development is just the start of what could potentially be a catastrophic series of events. So what I'd like to do is share a couple of quotes that I found and ultimately published in the Fisherman along the way over the past 5 years. The very first one comes by way of a 2012 study compiled by researcher Jennifer McCann of Coastal Resource Center at the University of Rhode Island, who says this: flounder were some of the only species to show correlations between the strength of the electromagnetic fields from cables and increasing avoidance behaviors around cables as their catches decreased around charged cables in Denmark. Cindy Ziff mentioned in her testimony that we're talking about somewhere along the line of 10,000 miles worth of these cables. Democrat or Republican, every coastal legislator in New Jersey or on Capitol Hill understands the importance of flounder in New Jersey. Summer flounder or fluke is what I call the straw that stirs the drink here at the Jersey Shore. We just had our opening on Tuesday. It's our most important, critically important fishery here at the Jersey Shore. So after publishing this data in the Fisherman magazine, I started taking some heat from environmental non-governmental organizations, industrial wind supporters. They called it rumor, innuendo, and fake news. So in December of 2019, I finally published all of my preliminary findings in an article that's at thefisherman.com called Myth or Matter: Is Offshore Wind Blowing In Too Fast? The feature itself features links to all the PDF research that I found going into this discussion about the effect of electromagnetic fields, or EMF, from high-powered undersea cables on fish behavior and biology, which is well documented. A Danish study in 2006 performed for Dong Energy, that of course is Danish oil and natural gas, now better known as Ørsted. It found, when it was talking about electromagnetic fields, quote, a significant correlation was found only for flounder. It said flounder primarily crossed the cable when the strength of the electromagnetic fields was estimated to be low, i.e. during calm periods. Again, the original McCann study that I said before, flounder catches decreased around charged cables in Denmark. A Danish study called Fish Benefits from Offshore Wind Farm Development, published in 2013, researchers found, again, I quote, data documented some effects from the cable route on fish behavior, with some species avoiding the cable. The researchers noted only flounder showed correlation between the phenomena observed and the strength of the electromagnetic fields. Then comes a study by the US Department of Energy called Effects of Electromagnetic Fields on Fish and Invertebrates that was found, this was a 2011 study. It found of Atlantic halibut, which is another flatfish, they were slightly smaller than those in the control portion of the experiments. So they put electromagnetic energy and a control with none with this halibut larva. And it showed that the larva exposed to EMF showed slightly delayed larval development. These are existing pieces of research that are out there that we have been told throughout the recreational fishing community. It's not true, it's unfounded. I have brought this to light in the Fisherman magazine. I've frequently covered it. I thank you, senators, for bringing us to the table, because thus far, all the mainstream media has relied on are quotes from people who claim to be recreational fishermen, but are supported by wind energy. All this rumor and innuendo that I've published in the Fisherman magazine, then comes a 388-page report issued by NOAA Fisheries and the Northeast Science Center in March of this year. It's a technical document. It's entitled Fisheries and Offshore Wind Interactions, Synthesis of Science. It found that fishermen may be displaced from traditional fishing grounds and that electromagnetic fields around high-power undersea cables can change fish behavior. The Synthesis of Science report says it's unclear what impact this electromagnetic field from these subsea cables will have on fisheries and fish behavior. But what it does say is that the lack of knowledge on the intensities of EMF anticipated from offshore wind cables makes it difficult to draw conclusions based on the studies to date. Now, personally, the studies already exist. They're done overseas in Denmark. Can't compare Denmark as a nation to even the New Jersey fishing community. We have government estimates, 500,000 to 1 million saltwater anglers in New Jersey. Denmark has 300,000 fishermen, freshwater and salt. This government report goes on to say, quote, any impacts of EMF to the availability of species may result in negative socioeconomic impacts to the fishing industry. But this most recent report from NOAA Fisheries does say that the most significant impact that will happen to recreational fishing from industrial offshore wind development will be from activity exclusion and possibly fish stock displacement, Though the fish study acknowledges, though this study acknowledges that impacts to NOAA fisheries stock assessment surveys will also be adversely impacted. NOAA Fisheries has acknowledged that they won't be able to do adequate fish stock assessment. It says, quote, by disrupting survey programs and the assessments that depend upon them, offshore wind development will result in serious adverse impacts on U.S. fisheries stakeholders. This government report further states, this is a quote from our government, these impacts will lead to greater uncertainty in abundance estimates, which will likely lead to lower fishery quotas and lost revenue to commercial and recreational fishermen. Now, I've been labeled a climate change denier, a tinfoil cap wearing extremist, an anti-green energy nut. This is my industry. This is our coastal economy. It's a culture and it's a tradition that I'm duty bound to report on and to protect. In a Zoom call with Ørsted back in 2020, I brought these defamed studies to the table. I talked to Dr. Gregory DeCellis from Ørsted. He's their fishery scientist. And I said, is this a concern? He said, yeah, I think it's a credible concern. So the recreational fishing community as a whole has not been heard. Some paid advocates with a rod and reel over their shoulder have gotten all the publicity. They've generated all the mainstream media quotes, all while data available from scientists and our government has been ignored. Senator Testa, you mentioned it before a lot, collateral damage. This has been a term that's been used a lot of times with some of my stakeholders. We've been told that we're going to be collateral damage in efforts to rapidly industrialize our coastal waters in the name of battling climate change. But I'm not willing to let this historic Jersey Shore industry go down as the sacrificial lamb to the slaughter. If I may, I'd like to leave you with another quote from our government. It comes from the Bureau of Ocean and Energy Management, it's BOEM. They offered as an admission about industrial offshore wind in a public comment request back in 2021. I think it's still labeled in all of their literature whenever they ask for public comment. It reads this, and it's really important to hear this. BOEM says, acknowledge this as you are submitting your public comments to us. Based on a preliminary evaluation of these resources, BOEM expects impacts to sea turtles and marine mammals from underwater noise caused by construction, as well as collision risks from vessel traffic. Structures installed by the project could permanently change benthic habitat and other fish habitat. Commercial fisheries and for hire recreational fishing may be impacted. Infrastructure above the water may affect the visual character that defines historic properties as well as contributes to recreation and tourism. Project structures also would pose an elision and a height hazard to vessels passing close by, and vessels would in turn pose a hazard to the structures. Additionally, the project may adversely impact any future mineral extraction, military use, air traffic, land-based radar services, as Megan mentioned, cables and pipeline and scientific surveys. Coast Guard has acknowledged that inside these turbines, radars will not work, probably will not work. We have a vibrant recreational fishing industry with a lot of boats that will be navigating in low light conditions. A lot of our recreational boats now have radar capabilities for navigating through fog and dark. Inside these turbine areas, there's a good chance that this radar will not work. This is the evidence that has been provided by the federal government. And despite all the advanced warnings, the basic recognition of scientific research, the documented facts about the adverse impacts that industrial offshore wind will have on our marine resources, our coastal fisheries, and tourism, the Biden-Murphy administrations continue to plow forward while stakeholders stand here with science in our hands, holding the science, saying it's right here, yet we're defamed, demoralized, discarded, and disparaged at every step along the way. So again, I thank you, senators, for jumping into this, for pausing for a moment to recognizing our concerns, which again, it's not based on emotion. In many ways, we've been asked to look at the science. I was asked to look at the science. I published the science and I come present the science, yet I'm told it doesn't exist. So thank you for holding this hearing, and I hope that we have some more in the future.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate your insightful testimony. And you are absolutely correct. You know, we always hear, let's follow the science until the science doesn't head in the direction that they want. then it's ignored. So I appreciate your testimony. Senator Testa or Scanlon, do you have any questions?
I do, Senator. Thank you. Jim, look, I've grown up in South Jersey, and I know just how important the recreational fishing industry is to the lifeblood, both for our residents and the hundreds of thousands of visitors to Southern New Jersey each and every year, as well as, the commercial industry is obviously a huge economic multiplier for our just for the industry in the state of New Jersey, not just South Jersey. What you said was how you got labeled a tinfoil hat wearing climate change science denier is exactly what we've all been labeled who are calling for a pause on this. And I think that's really the only defense that they have, because if we are going to follow the science, as Senator Bucco has said, Senator O'Scanlan has said, and we've all said that we want to follow the science, we want to have a fact-finding mission, we want to get to the bottom of this as to why these multiple whale deaths are occurring, multiple dolphin deaths are occurring, and what the impact is going to be both to the commercial and recreational fishing industry. We're told, no, you're wrong. And we're just going to go full steam ahead. I recognize the value of the recreational fishing industry, and your testimony has been extremely valuable. And again, I also think that there have been some folks who, I'm not a conspiracy theorist at all, but when they pose a recreational fishing individual out there, it seems to me that they may be, have been endorsed by Orsted or somebody else. There's certainly, potential, for that, to have that person put front and center and say, oh, I'm all for offshore wind, when in fact we know, again, Orsted has told me and my assembly mates that, the commercial fishing industry is going to be fine. They're going to be able to fish very closely to this. And finally, the commercial industry said, Lloyd's of London will not insure our vessels to go that close to these because of the potential for disaster. And I'm sure, guess what, that's probably going to happen with our recreational vessels as well, based on their own admissions that radar is not going to work there. And as you said, they're traveling in low light conditions when they are going out to the canyon and places like that. I mean, this is, I grew up fishing off the Jersey Shore, and it was fond memories, and you're absolutely correct. We don't want you to go gently into that good night by any stretch of the imagination, Jim. What are your, people who read your magazine saying, and what are you hearing from some of the government agencies when you bring these up, besides, hey, that you're a climate change denier? What are the answers that you're getting to the sundry of questions that I'm sure you've had?
So, well, thank you, Senator. I was at a club meeting. I spoke before a club meeting the other night, and I was just giving a seminar on bait presentation tactics. And one of the folks in the front of the room asked me, what do you think about the whale deaths as it associated with wind? So, I mean, I had to sit and say, listen, I have to stay in my lane here, and I can only talk about fisheries. That is the way this started with me, is speaking solely on the fisheries issue. At the beginning, I think a lot of the recreational fishing community was being sold the idea of, climate change is real, we've got to address that. I understand. And then there was a lot of discussion about, look at this turbine, it's going to be great fishing structure. Take a look at an oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico. You're going to have some great fishing around these oil rigs. You're going to have a great fishing around these wind turbines. As folks started to realize that we weren't talking about 5 or 10 or 30 or 100 turbines, that we're talking about 500 to 1,000 across millions of square miles of leased lands, I think folks started to finally realize, wow, this is a little bit deeper than I thought. You still have some folks that just really believe fundamentally of that, we got to address climate change. That's more important, and maybe it's going to create some good fish structure. But again, I'm going back to some of the benthic species. I'm going back to summer flounder, which is so important. If this research from Denmark proves correct here in the United States, our summer flounder fishery is going to be completely decimated. And it's very similar to the whale thing. I'll bring up this point. We've heard a lot of testimony about all of the advanced warnings of what offshore wind development could do to marine mammals. And then it seems to come to fruition, and the government says we have no evidence. Highly circumstantial evidence, of course, I guess. But it's the same thing for us. If we do this and we find out, for example, the impact to summer flounder is 20% loss in available stock, the government's going to say to the fishermen, it's 20% loss in stock, you did it. Because Magnuson-Stevenson Act will then kick in. And the only way to address a 20% loss is by a 20% cutback, or 30 or 40 on the recreational commercial community. So slowly but surely, folks in the community are really starting to understand that this is a monumental impact, or could potentially be.
Excuse me, Jim, I don't mean to interrupt you, but, or you simultaneously, you'll get the narrative that, guess what? The flounder stock is down due to climate change.
Could be that too, yes.
Listen, I want to jump in here. We're just about at the 2-hour mark. I know, you know, some of the other senators have other commitments today. Let me say this as we kind of wrap up, and I'll give each of the other senators an opportunity to say a couple parting words. But first, I want to make it clear that we did offer the opportunity to the NJDEP and to Orsted to appear today, and they chose not to. I think the other thing that I think is critical is to understand that all of us as senators representing, whether it's South Jersey, Central Jersey, or North Jersey, we all believe in a clean environment, right? We want our environment to be clean and healthy for our residents to enjoy and for our children and grandchildren to enjoy in the future. But there's a couple of things that I am taking away from today's testimony. Number one, it doesn't seem to me like this whole wind farms process was done in a fair, open, and transparent process. It seems like we rushed a lot of this through, and many of the concerns were ignored. The second thing I take away from this hearing today is that it is not correct that there is a lack of data to link the construction of the wind farms to marine mammal deaths. I mean, we've seen the charts, we've listened to the data. There is certainly evidence to show the potential for a connection between the two. And the third thing I take away from this is that, you know, the public needs to understand that if we don't address this now, we are in the verge of a huge increase in activity off our coast. And if so far we've seen this spike in marine mammal death, what will that increased activity have? I think that question is unknown, and I think we need to get to the bottom of it. And then I think the fourth thing is that, you know, common sense just dictates that from what we've heard today, that folks should take a pause. I mean, there's no reason for the Murphy administration, based on the facts and evidence that we saw today, not want to pause to get to the bottom of this and get a clear and answer, verify the truth on this critical subject. And then the final thing I'll say is that I hope that today is only the beginning. I hope that our colleagues on the other side of the aisle will look at this evidence and agree that we need to do things further. So I'm going to wrap that up. Senator O'Scanlan, I know you've got to jump, so I'm going to go to you first.
I appreciate it, Senator Bucco. And this, what a really informative day this has been. Jim, thank you for being here. Megan, you as well, and all our other presenters. Again, I don't have to reiterate the summary that Senator Bucco just laid out. It's really fascinating information, and it should be compelling to the other side that there need to be more open minds. So we're going to continue to pound away at that. I look forward to being part of that, and this is the first step. So thank you. I apologize that I have to jump, but really appreciate you being here today. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Testa?
Yeah, Senator Bucco, I think you said a whole lot, and I don't want to just go over that. And I appreciate all of the folks who testified here today. I learned a lot about a subject that I thought I knew quite a decent amount about. I just want to wrap this up specifically talking about our commercial fishing industry and our recreational fishing industry. There are no better stewards of the environment than our fishing industries. There's no way that they would want to destroy the very environment in which they are harvesting the food that we put on the tables across the state of New Jersey. And for those who are the recreational fishermen and women, they want to come back each and every year to make sure that they have an activity that they can pursue. There's no way that they want to harm the environment whatsoever. And I think that we've heard enough today that we certainly have made the case to take a pause and follow the actual science and follow a scientific method to have a moratorium on this. And again, you know, to Senator Bucco's point, none of us are here to attempt to destroy the environment. We want to have a clean environment, but we also have to recognize that our tourism industry and our fisheries need to be able to thrive. And we're not going to be able to thrive if, in fact, we have damaged the environment by damaging and killing marine life. There's no possible way that we could want to do this to the environment. And as I said earlier, we have one chance to get this either right or one chance to get this colossally wrong. And I think that we've made the case today. Thank you.
I agree. I agree. I want to thank all of the witnesses that came and testified today. You know, I think we've said it already that what we learned today was, you know, something that I don't think has been out there in the community. And hopefully today will be the beginning of further discussions on this issue. And hopefully the governor will see the light and press the pause button until we can make absolutely sure that we are not further harming our environment for what some believe is an environmental issue from the very start. So, you know, we can't harm the environment by trying to make it a cleaner environment. And I think we have to make sure that we're able to be able to balance the two. So thank you very much, Brad.
All right, thank you, everyone. This video, it's going to be archived on our Facebook page, facebook.com/SenatNJ. It's also going to be posted on our YouTube account, New Jersey Senate Republicans. So that'll be up live. It'll be up there later today if anyone wants to do it. And with that, we're going to end the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.